Hello and welcome to this webinar today. My name is Liz Dollin and I am Director of Operations at St John's School and College. We're an SEM provision in Sussex, and I'm joined by my colleague.
My name is Christine. I am the HR Manager for St John's School and College.
Okay, thank you. So today we are going to be talking about the subtle art of giving feedback, or
not so subtle art of giving feedback, but it's pretty much we want to focus on receiving feedback and to introduce that concept and to introduce our session for today. We'd like you to watch a short clip from TED Talk. Thanks for watching that nice clip. I think to introduce our session for today, we're seeing feedback as a way to feed forward and to distinguish between mirror holding and window gazing in relation to feedback.
Perfect, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the clip. I think it's really interesting. The window gaze and the mirror holding thing really resonates, I think, with both of us and with people that we've worked with for years, both in our professional capacity as HR practitioners and as coaches too. So what we are going to do now is talk about in more detail what feedback to feed forward actually means and how we can try and move away from this traditional kind of hierarchical model of people always giving us feedback in a way that is more of a kind of push model, really, and going back to that sort of window gazing model. And we want really for you to reflect and think about, well, how could feedback feel different? How could it be something that you actually really look forward to receiving, and how can it help you in terms of your growth and development? And what is the point of feedback? Why do we get it? Why do we need it? Is it useful? It can be. It can also be really not useful sometimes, but it might be something you come back to. I think a lot of the time we talk about feedback being a gift, don't we? It's a gift if you can try and look at it with a positive mindset and not get caught up on the fact that sometimes it can trigger stuff for us, which we will come to shortly. If you can think about the gifts that you've received over the years, how some of them you love, some of them you don't, some of them you love for a while and then you give to a charity shop, some of them you shove in a cupboard and you think, maybe, and you pull it out years later and it's like, oh, okay, actually, that jumper I really didn't like really fits now and it makes a lot of sense to me. So I think that's really one of the concepts that we'd like you to think about and reflect on during the webinar and hopefully after the webinar as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to develop the skill to really not wait for good givers. We see feedback as a gift, and we may not always have good givers, but that doesn't mean that their feedback may not be helpful for us, whether it be on that particular moment that they're giving it to us or at some point in the future, and for some of us years later it might resonate. So what we want is for you to reflect on any given feedback given by anybody in however form, and just assess it to see if that is something that you'd want to take, even 10% of it, instead of completely disregarding it without looking into anything helpful that you might gain for it.
Okay, Sheila Heen is a writer that we deeply respect. She's written a really good book on feedback, and it was something I read it sort of, I can't remember how many years ago, and it really, really stayed with me. It really resonated with me, and I found it incredibly useful. So it's called Thanks for the Feedback. It's by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen, for any of you interested in this subject. And what I really liked about the book is it focused, again, less on I guess giving feedback, because it feels as though when you become a manager and you work through management leadership, there's so many training courses on books on how to give feedback, how to have difficult conversations and all that stuff. But we don't really talk enough, or people don't seem to talk enough about how you can become a really good receiver of feedback. And my belief is the better you become at receiving it and kind of sitting in feedback for a while, actually it gives you the skills to be better at giving feedback somehow. It really helps you in that ways. well.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting quote on the screen. I think there is a direct conflict, but I think once we can start to understand that feedback is given to support us, and if you truly love someone and care about them, you would give them that feedback, even if that felt tricky. You would give that to them because you care about them. So once you can kind of get comfortable with the fact that it is a natural conflict, but it's not a conflict that we can't overcome. So now we're going to do an exercise, because what we want you to think about is when you've received feedback, how did it feel? What was happening inside of you at that moment in time? Particularly maybe if it was feedback from somebody that you struggle with, or it was feedback that wasn't particularly maybe complimentary and was a little bit difficult to receive. So we're just going to do that. If I can find my piece of paper, which I found. Okay. So on the count of 1, 2, 3, you're going to hear both our voices. 1, 2, 3. The future for me is, I don't know, uncertain, unclear. A lot of my words, those are negative, right?
Straps on your shoulders.
Untalked
you feel them?
That's not a word.
Now I
Wait,
want you to pack it all the stuff you have in your life.
I was able to cook dinner for my sister, spaghetti.
Drawers
I'm getting good
and
at
on
that.
shelves.
Afterwards, we did the dishes. I washed.
Feel the weight.
She drives. We laugh
now
like we're doing something normal, like we do it all the time.
Clothes,
I can't do the dishes. I have a date.
Appliances, lamps,
we do not talk
your
about
TV.
Why would we? Nothing has changed. Where is she? Don't know.
Heavy at this point.
Did she give you any money? No. The
your
rent's
sofa,
due. The
your
rent's
bed,
due. I have no energy to think about the future.
Stuff it
the
all
present
in.
takes
Your
effort
car,
doing
get it
the
in
dishes
there.
is not normal.
Your home, whether you
it's
have a
fake,
studio or
because that's what brothers and sisters are supposed to do. You drive. Why do I have to drive?
Try
I
to
always
walk.
drive. The rent
Kind
is
of hard,
due.
isn't it? This is what we. Cool.
Yeah. So, how did you find that? I found that really stressful. It's really hard trying to read when somebody's reading next to you. I don't know. It might have made you feel a bit panicky. You're probably trying to listen to both things, and you're probably trying to work out, well, which voice maybe is more important. And the reason we've done that exercise is it's not actually about listening skills so much. It's trying to demonstrate what is happening to your brain when you are receiving feedback. Because naturally for us, we associate feedback with, we can associate it with being quite a stressful process, I guess, of stressful experience to go through.
Especially if you're not prepared for it, somebody meeting you in the corridor, giving you a bit of feedback, you'll probably have 1,000 things in your brain, and that's how you feel. You wanted to hear it, you hear bits of it, but you're not ready to accept it or to, to really understand what is being said. So I think, it really, it's a good exercise because you would start to identify when feedback is being given to you, but you are not ready to receive it. So I think in that particular respect, we've all experienced that. We can just say, we can manage that, whether it's our line manager or somebody telling us, whether we say, can we meet a bit later? Can we set aside some time for it so that you are in a position to receive that feedback wholly?
I think what happens is because we tend to associate feedback with somebody telling us about our shortcomings, we go into a slight flight or kind of fright, really frenzy, don't we? So our sympathetic sort of nervous system kicks in and we start to panic and we go into that survival mode as if we're being attacked, really. So we start to shut down, our brain starts to tell us all these things because we're stressed. And at that point, we just don't have the ability to hear or learn. I find it really interesting because I've been working in HR for 20 plus years, and I have seen many, many, many colleagues over the years. I can read their faces as soon as I send them a letter or say I'd like to meet them. You can almost immediately see the change of body language and the fear in the eyes of, oh no, she's going to tell me something I don't want to hear. Where in another aspect of my life, I'm a coach, and the whole process of coaching is just ongoing communication and conversation. So the whole point of somebody wanting a coach and paying somebody to coach them is because actually they want to grow and they want feedback and they want that sort of continuous challenge, I guess, really. And so there's no fear. They're relaxed, they're ready, they're in that state of mind where they really want to challenge themselves and move forwards, where, that's at such odds with the kind of traditional HR and leadership approach, where it's not an ongoing conversation. We're not really handing the power, I guess, or the control over to somebody else for them to reflect on where they think they may want to improve. Instead, we're doing that kind of pushing action all the time, telling. And I really believe and agree with Sheila Heen that that's what the issue is with feedback. We are telling people, we are shining a light on something that actually, you know what, they probably know already, but it's the process. And I just don't believe that anyone can truly evolve or improve on that.
That's true, and that might explain why you might have people in your team that you keep on telling exactly the same thing, but the behavior or the performance doesn't change because they're not really receiving it.
Yeah, I agree completely. And that just, I think this slide just says it really. I think we've all given feedback to people who just, well, I know that I've been that person as well, particularly if I'm getting feedback from certain individuals in my personal life. I'm already on that defense and attack mode instead of maybe just sitting with that feedback, instead of jumping to, wow, well, I'm going to tell you some things and kind of argue back. I think, and there's so many reasons why we do that, but I think if we can, I think a lot of it comes from guilt. I think when I do that, the truth is I'm feeling guilty about having not done something probably. And I think,
or it's just defensive. It's a survival mode.
You feel attacked.
So you feel attacked because of the person, this relationship. It's we'll go to triggers later on, but there's something in you that just is not ready.
Yeah, it's really problematic, isn't it? And I think sometimes it's so difficult to how we see ourselves and how others see us. It can be so
situational as well. So it might be, you're completely in a different state of mind. You're probably having problems. You're probably stressed about something completely different. And somebody waltzes in and just give you feedback that on a more resilient day you would have accepted. But on that day that you're not feeling so resilient, you've taken it completely the wrong way. And we've all been there.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we've kind of touched on what can be quite triggering about feedback and why feedback can result in us being a bit defensive or anxious or however we're feeling. So now we're going to take you through some of the triggers that Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone identified in their book that we find really useful. And when we train people in this area, it seems to really resonate with them. Okay.
So with the triggers, we've made it quite easy to remember. So the 3 triggers, you have the truth trigger, which is the challenge of C, relationship trigger, which is the challenge of we, and the identity trigger, which is the challenge of me. So with the truth trigger, it is basically whether the feedback you're receiving is right or wrong. So there's an element of wrong spotting where somebody is trying to tell you something and you're already identifying what's wrong about what they're saying, and you're already in defense mode and you're already preparing what you're going to be telling them. I think it's a survival mode where you're being triggered by things that people perceive about you that you are completely 100% sure that is wrong. And that's, we all feel that. And I think this is quite important, especially when somebody in your team is telling you about somebody else's performance. So within HR, we get third-hand information on a few incidents, and sometimes it's very difficult to identify what the truth is and be able to provide the right advice without having the truth in front of us, really, because that could be problematic if you're basing any advice on something that may not be truthful.
Yeah, I think there's nothing more anxiety provoking than somebody hearing, I need to let you know that this is what I've been told about your performance or your conduct, and sometimes it's not factual and it lacks facts, and immediately, even if there's some truth in that and some good feedback to be had, at that moment I think you've lost the opportunity, really, because if the facts aren't really correct, then it's just not going to work at all.
And one of the things that you could really you can overcome this is by simply asking questions. You can ask questions about, okay, how do you know that, or what made you think that way? What sort of conversations did you have with this other person? So by drilling into facts, you're able to determine what's truth or not. So hopefully that will, provide you with the tools that you need to be able to unpick that, so you understand where that feedback is coming from. And at the end, you'd want to make an informed decision as well, based on the information that was given to you. So hopefully that's helpful. Relationship trigger is more of a we can resonate with relationship triggers, and I think this is more common when you've actually got somebody that you may not have a good relationship with, or have had some very combative interaction, and there's nothing that they could say to you that you would take as good feedback because purely of your relationship with them. So I'm sure we've all had exes before, so it takes a long while to be in that place where you can receive whatever feedback that they're trying to give you, and maybe sit on that a little bit before either completely disregarding it, or taking some of it that might be helpful for you. Also, on the flip side, you have people whom you might have really, really good relationships with, and you're really, you trust them. They're probably your mentors. They're probably the ones that looked after you, and that's fine. And it's just that sometimes, having, completely accepting their feedback without really thinking about it, whether you have some learning from it, it might need some, you might need to sit on it in a little bit, and just to really determine whether or how that feedback benefits you in a way. So, it's good to think about, both extremes.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the identity trigger, I think this is a biggie because it's more about you, and it's the way that you are wired, and how you see the world. So I think we're all very protective of our own sense of self and our identity, and that is brought about by the many years that you've been in this earth, and your relationships, your experiences, your struggles, your successes, and your achievements. So it's it's, and rightly so, that you're very protective of that. With our identity, it's all about our sensitivity to positive feedback, and more importantly, critical feedback.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. So we within in Sheila and David's book, they came up with the swing and sustain recover graph, where they describe everybody has got a baseline. Some people's baseline behaviors are they're happy, they're always happy, annoyingly happy. On the flip side, there are people that are their baseline is just miserable. There's nothing wrong, they're all right, but they're just miserable. That's their baseline.
Outlook.
Negative outlook, yeah. That could be, I'm sure we know of people that has got that sort of baseline behavior. But for yourself, determine your baseline behavior. What is, just neutral. If you receive positive feedback, then that's where the swing and sustain comes in. So for somebody that receives positive feedback, they swing quite low. They just say, "Oh, thank you. I take that. That's quite nice. That's quite nice to hear." And then they go back to baseline, and they're back to their normal behavior. Whereas if you give somebody the same positive feedback, they swing really high. They sustain that for a long period of time, and maybe have a bit of distortion in their brain on how that feedback was really meant to be given. So you'd start thinking about anybody in your team that you think that swings low, those that swing high and stay high, and it's quite a good exercise. I think you should do it. On a different side, you have, you give the same feedback to two different people. One of them would swing low and say, thanks very much for that. I appreciate that. That was a ball dropped. I know where things needed to improve, and it will be better soon. And we won't be making these mistakes again, and we've learned a lesson. And then they go back to baseline and move on.
Yeah.
But then you have people that would take that feedback and would really take it to heart, that would swing really, really high and stay there for quite a long period of time before they go back to their baseline, their baseline behavior. It's very difficult because you'd have, for people like that, and like I can relate. It's about, and I'm not sure if anybody of you have Googled symptoms, and they, and then all of these other serious stuff is coming up, and the lesson is to identify when you're staying there, and what are the tools that you can use to get you back into baseline, so you can move on, and you've learned the lesson, and be able to get on with your day.
I think it's a balance act, because when I think about the team the teams currently manage and have managed previously, there's always a real mixture, and I think of people and how they respond to either positive or critical feedback. And I think that's why it's really important to understand your colleagues and your team members as well. And for me, there's a real balancing sort of thin line between people that almost are too egotistical and live off a bit of positive feedback and blow it up to something it's kind of not, but also who almost don't respond in a way as well as I would like them to critical feedback. So although I don't want anyone to kind of throw themselves off a cliff, because it's like that's fine, that's a little bit over the top, we don't need to be there, this is not the end of the world, we just need to improve that one piece of work. There's also an issue with people that kind of just go, yep, sure, okay, fine, and then move on, and don't, you feel as though as a feedback giver, I guess, or as a leader or manager, like, okay, you're not really open to sitting with this, you're telling me you've heard it, but you've moved on almost too quickly. I don't see you sitting in it and reflecting on it as well. So it's a really thin line to walk. And I think this exercise is really worth doing for individuals. And I think if you're a manager and you're listening to this, I think it's worth doing it in terms of your team and thinking about your team and how they respond. Some people are completely intrinsically self-motivated. So I'm not a team player I'm a team player, I hope, but not in terms of sports. It doesn't interest me. I'm not interested in being in teams and competing. It just doesn't interest me. What I will do is lift weights or go swimming or spinning or whatever, and I'm totally competing with my own RPM and my own heart rate stuff from the week before, my own reps. My validation is very much kind of me
in terms of internal progress.
Yeah, where other people need that external validation or need that external feedback a lot. And yeah, I think it's just really important to understand the people you work with. But in terms of your baseline, I think what's really important is knowing how to get back to it and how to make sure you don't, particularly critical, right? To make sure you don't swing too high for too long.
Too long.
Yeah. So,
I think because you get paralyzed, and you're not able to continue with with your work, and for mental, for well-being reasons as well. That's not a good place to be in for a long time.
No, I agree completely. So I don't know if you think about the world at the moment, people out of employment and going for jobs, if you continue to not get those jobs after going for interviews, I can imagine someone at that point could swing really high and stay there and start to have really quite deep negative thoughts about themselves. And it's about trying to develop a more positive mindset, I think, to just get you back to where you need to be, and understand that it hurts, but there might be something useful in there, really. Okay, well, that brings us on nicely to the next slide. And this, we'll let you read that. We won't read it to you, but this is really about a growth identity, developing what is called a growth identity. And hopefully those of you listening to this webinar have heard of a growth mindset. We are going to be releasing another webinar on that subject soon. We are delivering quite a lot of training about that at the moment at St. John's. And really the link here is that it says it on the screen, and it kind of relates to what I was just talking about. If you're able to have a growth mindset and more of a positive outlook, you just come back to that baseline a bit quicker. You don't stay in that difficult place, because you know what? Feedback isn't scary. It's cool. It's brilliant. It can help you grow, even if it hurts for a little bit. Or I find people with a growth mindset are the people that come and find people like me as a coach, and are just so able to acknowledge their obstacles, but then have the mindset where they want to kind of work past those and work through them and over them, and they don't see every mistake or failure as this terrible thing. They see it as an opportunity to learn and develop, and I think that is key.
Yeah, definitely.
When we're talking about receiving feedback. And that's it. We hope that's been really useful and helpful. It's just a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of an introduction to how you can think about receiving feedback differently. And if you are interested in receiving more detailed training on this, we do this with small groups of people really interested in working with teams on this subject, and you can get in touch with us at St. John's. Again, my name is Liz Dollin, and
McFee.
Thank you for listening to us today.